The mayor's voice echoed off the marble lobby walls, past the crystal chandeliers, past the polished brass elevator doors, past every surface that Gloria Mensa had cleaned with her own hands for 22 years. 700 people filled the atrium. City council members, the governor's deputy, 3 news cameras, a children's choir in white shirts pressed so crisp they caught the light. And in the middle of it all, behind a curtain of ivory silk, a bronze plaque that bore a name no one in that room had thought to ask for, not once, in 22 years. Not the building director, not the department heads in their corner offices, not the contractors who had remodeled the lobby twice while Gloria mopped around their scaffolding without complaint. The mayor lifted the curtain, and the name on the plaque made every person in the room go still. Because it wasn't a politician's name. It wasn't a donor's name. It wasn't anyone who had sat at a mahogany desk, or given a speech, or cut a ribbon. It was the name of the woman who had cleaned this building before anyone else arrived, and after everyone else left, for 2 decades and 2 years. And not a single person in that room could say, until this moment, that they had deserved to know it. Rewind 22 years. The city's Department of Public Works occupied a building that had been renovated in 1998 to the standard of bureaucratic luxury, polished granite floors, floor-to-ceiling windows on the east face, a lobby chandelier that cost more than most people's cars, and a facilities contract that went to the lowest bidder. That bidder was Sunrise Custodial Services, a small cleaning company run out of a strip mall office in the east side of the city. Sunrise had 3 full-time supervisors and a rotating roster of workers who took whatever shifts were available. Gloria Mensa was one of them. She was 34 years old when she first walked through the service entrance of that building with a cleaning cart that squeaked on the left wheel. 2 kids at home, Kofi, 7, and Abina, 4, a husband who had just started his 2nd year of community college on a schedule that meant she worked nights while he studied evenings. The math was brutal and barely worked. But it worked. Gloria took the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6 nights a week, and she never complained about the hours. Because complaining about the hours didn't change them. She had grown up in Accra, the second of 5 children, in a household where work was not something you discussed, it was something you did. Her mother had cleaned houses and ironed clothes for other families for 30 years. Her father had driven a delivery van until his back gave out, then driven a taxi until his eyes did. They had come to America 1 year before Gloria was born, not because America was easy, but because easy was never what they had been promised. They had been promised possible. That was enough. Gloria understood this before she could articulate it, and she carried it like a second spine. She was quiet at work, not shy. There is a difference. She spoke when spoken to, did what was asked, and then did more than what was asked. Because doing exactly what was asked had always struck her as a kind of minimum she wasn't interested in. She learned the building's rhythms the way some people learn music, by listening until the structure revealed itself. She knew which offices generated the most paper waste on Mondays. Knew that the 4th floor break room always had a coffee ring on the left counter because the coffee maker sat slightly off-center and nobody had moved it in 15 years. Knew that Director Alderman's office, the executive suite at the end of the North Corridor, required an extra 15 minutes on Thursdays because he held leadership dinners on Wednesdays and always left the conference table worse than he found it. She knew all of this and filed it quietly and got on with the work. Director Gerald Alderman had run the Department of Public Works for 11 of the 22 years Gloria was in the building. He was the kind of man who had arrived at authority through patience rather than brilliance, a competent administrator who knew how to manage upward and hold a room. He wore good suits from a department store that he claimed were custom. He had a firm handshake, a reliable memory for the names of people who mattered, and a complete blindness to the people who didn't. He had walked past Gloria Mensa's cart at least 1,000 times in 11 years. He had never once looked at her face. It wasn't malice. That was the thing about Gerald Alderman. It was never malice. It was the particular invisibility that certain people earn by never demanding to be seen. Gloria didn't demand. So, she wasn't seen. And the building ran beautifully, and nobody wondered why, and Gerald Alderman went home every evening to his Tudor-style house in the north suburbs and never thought about what happened to the building after he left. The routine was this. Gloria arrived at 10 p.m., signed in at the service desk, collected her cart, and began on the 6th floor. Working downward, she finished the lobby at approximately 4:30 am and used the last 90 minutes for trash collection, restocking, and the kind of deep cleaning that required silence and the absence of foot traffic. By 5:45 she was done. By 6 she was at the bus stop. By 7:15 she was home, starting breakfast for 2 kids before school. She did this for 22 years, but the routine had a seam in it that took Gloria 11 years to find. Not a flaw, exactly. A door. Specifically, the door to the building's archive room on the 2nd floor, which was supposed to be locked after hours, and which, as of approximately 2008, was not. The lock mechanism had been damaged in a minor flooding incident and repaired improperly, leaving a latch that looked closed but didn't catch. Gloria discovered this one night when she leaned her cart against the door and it swung inward. She pulled the cart back, noted the door, and the next morning left a maintenance note at the service desk. It was her 14th maintenance note that year. Like all the others, it was filed and forgotten. 3 weeks later, the door was still unlocked. Gloria propped it open properly with a doorstop and cleaned inside for the first time. What she found was not surprising. Archive rooms in government buildings are usually variations of the same thing. Filing cabinets, storage boxes, the sediment of institutional memory that no one has time to process. But in this particular archive room, pushed against the far wall under a cloth cover that had yellowed with age, was a corkboard. And on that corkboard, pinned with care, were photographs. She stood in front of them for a long time with her cart idling in the doorway. They were photographs of the building's original staff, 1962, when the Department of Public Works had been established in the city. Formal portraits, the kind that required everyone to dress up and stand still, directors, administrators, engineers, and in the bottom row, 3 women in white uniforms, labeled simply in typed text beneath their images. Custodial staff. Their names were below each photo: Rosa, Delia, Marvel, no last names. No titles beyond the word that described their function. 3 women who had made this building workable from its first day, reduced to 3 first names on the bottom row of a photograph that hadn't been looked at in decades. Gloria looked at their faces for a long time. Then she went back to her cart, finished the floor, and didn't mention the photographs to anyone. But she thought about them. Every night, moving through the building in the hours when no one else was present, she thought about Rosa and Delia and Marvel. She thought about what it meant to work in a place for years and leave no mark that the place acknowledged. She thought about her own mother, who had ironed other people's shirts for 30 years and never had her name on anything more permanent than a time card. She thought about whether things had changed, or whether they had only changed in the ways that were visible from the executive floor. She kept her maintenance notes. She kept them after the archive room door was finally fixed 18 months later, not because of her notes, she was clear-eyed about that, but because the building underwent a security audit, and an inspector found the latch. She kept her notes after the coffee maker on the 4th floor was finally moved 4 years into her tenure, which she discovered one morning with a small private satisfaction she kept entirely to herself. She kept her notes the way a person keeps a ledger, not expecting anything to balance out, just believing that accuracy mattered. What she didn't keep, because she didn't know she should, was any record of the night she went beyond her job description. The night the 3rd floor pipes burst at 2 a.m., and she stayed 4 extra hours helping facilities staff clear the water before the morning crew arrived. The winter storm that shut down the city and left 3 homeless men sheltering in the building's loading dock. Gloria brought them coffee from the break room and radioed facilities, and when the supervisor arrived, she translated between the men, one of whom spoke only French, and the supervisor, who did not. The night she found an unconscious maintenance worker in the basement stairwell and called 911 and stayed with him, holding his hand and speaking to him quietly in 2 languages until the paramedics arrived and told her she had likely kept him calm enough to survive what turned out to be a cardiac event. His name was Marcus. He sent her a card from the hospital. She kept it in her locker for 11 years until the day she retired. The retirement was not supposed to be an event. Gloria had arranged it quietly. 2 weeks' notice to her supervisor at Sunrise Custodial, a brief conversation with the service desk supervisor at the building, and a last shift on a Friday in November when the building was quiet and the cleaning went exactly as it always had. She had told her children, now adults, that she didn't want a party. Kofi, who had become an electrical engineer, drove in anyway and waited in the parking lot. Abina, who had become a public school principal, called 11 times during the shift. Gloria cleaned the lobby one final time at 4:30 a.m., returned her cart to the supply room, turned in her badge, and walked out the service entrance into the cold November air where her son was leaning against his car, pretending he hadn't been crying. She had not expected anyone in the building to notice. She was wrong, but it would take another 9 months for her to find out why. What Gloria didn't know was that Marcus, the maintenance worker whose hand she'd held in the basement stairwell 11 years earlier, had spent those 11 years telling that story to anyone who would listen. He told it to the facilities director. He told it to the new building manager who came in after Director Alderman retired. He told it to the woman from the city's Community Recognition Office who came in 2019 to interview staff about their experience in city buildings. And in that interview, Marcus told it in full. The cardiac event, the stairwell, the hand in his, the voice in 2 languages keeping him tethered while his heart tried to leave him. The woman from the Community Recognition Office wrote it down. She asked Marcus the name of the cleaning woman. He said it without hesitation. He'd had 11 years of practice. The investigation, that is not too strong a word for what followed, took 6 months. The Community Recognition Office, working with the building's new director, a woman named Dr. Patricia Yuen, who had grown up poor and understood exactly what she was looking for, assembled a file. The file grew. Former staff members, interviewed in 1s and 2s, mentioned Gloria's name in the way that people mention the name of someone who had, without announcement, made their lives a little more manageable. The woman who translated for the French-speaking man in the loading dock. The woman who stayed during the pipe burst. The woman who left maintenance notes for 22 years, 260 of them in the archive, and whose notes, now that someone was finally reading them, constituted an extraordinarily precise record of every infrastructure problem in the building over 2 decades. Problems that, when addressed, had saved the city money. Money that the budget office, once Dr. Yuen asked them to look, was able to actually calculate. The number was significant. Dr. Yuen presented it to the city council in September. The council voted in November. The ceremony was scheduled for January, and an invitation was sent to a retired woman in the east side of the city who had been home for 9 months and had not expected to hear from that building again. Gloria Mensa wore her church clothes on the day of the ceremony, a deep burgundy dress with a gold brooch that had been her mother's. Her daughter Abina had her hair done the day before, and her son Kofi drove her in a car he had washed himself that morning. She didn't know what the ceremony was for. Exactly. The letter had said community recognition, which she had taken to mean some general acknowledgement, the kind of thing bureaucracies organize periodically to justify line items. She wore the church clothes because her mother had taught her you dress for what something might be, not only for what you've been told it is. She walked in through the front entrance for the first time in 22 years. She had always used the service entrance, the lobby, the one she had cleaned 1,000 times, the marble she had polished on her hands and knees when the machine couldn't reach the edges, the chandelier whose crystals she had learned to clean with a particular cloth and a particular solution that didn't leave streaks, looked different from this angle. Larger, more formal. Her hands remembered the marble before her eyes had time to process it. 700 people turned when she walked in. Gloria Mensa stopped walking. Her breath caught. Her daughter took her arm, and she grounded herself the way she had always grounded herself, slowly, deliberately, from the feet up. She looked at the room, at the faces, at the mayor, at the podium, at the children's choir, small and bright in their pressed shirts, at the curtain of ivory silk at the far end of the lobby. And she walked forward. The mayor spoke for 12 minutes. He talked about service, about the kind of contribution that never makes the morning paper, about what a city is made of beneath its visible surfaces. He talked about the maintenance notes, 260 of them, read aloud now in summary, each one a small act of attention, and the money saved, and the infrastructure preserved. He talked about Marcus, who was there, seated near the front, hands folded, trying very hard not to make a sound. He talked about a city's obligation to see the people who hold it together. Then he lifted the curtain. Gloria's name, in bronze, on the building she had entered through the service entrance for 22 years. The whole name, Gloria Adwoa Mensa, in letters 4 inches high, mounted beside the lobby entrance where every person who walked into that building would pass it for as long as the building stood. Not a plaque tucked inside a corridor or in an alcove where it could be missed. Right there at the main entrance, the first thing anyone saw. Below the name, a single line of text, in recognition of 22 years of faithful, invisible, and essential service. Gloria read it once. Then, again, her eyes moved across each letter the way her hands had once moved across this marble, carefully, completely, making sure nothing was missed. The room erupted. Gloria did not erupt. She stood very still the way she had always stood very still in moments that required her to hold herself together from the inside. Her daughter was crying. Her son was crying. Marcus, near the front, was not trying anymore. 3 city council members, at least 2 of whom had walked past her cart in the hallway without looking up, were on their feet. The children's choir, taking their cue from the adults, began to sing, something old, something that had the shape of a hymn without being one, and the marble lobby filled with sound the way it had never filled during any of the years Gloria had been alone in it. She thought about Rosa, Delia, Marvel, 3 names on the bottom row of a photograph in a room that was always locked. She thought about her mother, ironing shirts in other people's houses, and her father in his taxi, and the word possible that had been enough to bring them across an ocean. She thought about Marcus's hand in hers in a dark stairwell, and the French-speaking man in the loading dock, and 260 maintenance notes, and a coffee maker finally moved after 4 years. And the quiet private satisfaction of a job done so completely that the building never knew it needed doing. The mayor crossed the lobby and extended his hand. Gloria Mensah looked at it. Then she looked up at the plaque, at her own name in bronze, 4 inches high, in the building she had cleaned before anyone arrived and after everyone left. She took his hand. Steady, no trembling. She was 61 years old, and she had never, not once, done the work for the recognition. But the recognition had found her anyway, the way certain true things do, slowly, through the accumulation of small, honest acts, through the people who had noticed and remembered and finally said so. The children's choir sang. The chandelier, which she had cleaned with a particular cloth and a particular solution that didn't leave streaks, threw light in every direction. And the marble floor, polished for 22 years by hands that were now clasped inside a handshake with the mayor of the city, shone the way it had always shone. Because someone had made it so, long before anyone thought to ask her name. In the months that followed, Dr. Patricia Yuen launched what she called the Unseen Hours Initiative, a formal program to document and recognize long-serving facility staff across all city buildings, modeled on the investigation that had uncovered Gloria's story. In its first year, the initiative profiled 41 workers, installed 7 commemorative plaques, and retroactively named a city park after a groundskeeper who had maintained it for 31 years and died the year before, without ceremony. Gloria was asked to chair the initiative's advisory board. She said yes on the condition that she could bring Marcus, who agreed before she finished asking. Kofi, her son, had the photograph of the lobby plaque framed and mounted in his office. When people asked about it, he explained it the same way every time. That's my mother's building. Not the building where she worked. Her building. Abina, her daughter, hung a copy of the mayor's speech in her school's hallway, the part about invisible work, about what a city is made of beneath its surfaces. She told her students every year that the most important things are often done by people who are never in the room when the credit is given, that this was not right, that they should be the generation that changed it. And every morning, in the lobby of the city's Department of Public Works building, the people who work there pass a bronze plaque with a name they now know by heart. Some of them pause. Some of them have started leaving a single flower at the base, a practice nobody organized, that simply began one day and continued because it felt correct. Gloria Adwoa Mensah, who cleaned that lobby for 22 years at 4:30 in the morning when no one was watching, knows about the flowers. Her daughter told her. She told her daughter what her mother had told her, once in a kitchen in Cleveland, over a pot of stew that smelled like home. Work done well is its own kind of prayer. The answer doesn't always come in this life, but it comes.